far back as you can see. That side of the street they had sprinklers. Everywhere else, nothing but chimneys standing.
Ash, rubble, and metal. Debris that just a day ago were businesses, trees, homes.
There's Mom and Dad's house.
Video emerging from inside the town site, verified by CBC News. Some neighborhoods virtually gone, while others seemed untouched by fire. 2 fires were within kilometers of the town all day Wednesday. Crews kept fighting until winds suddenly picked up and turned on them. Embers rained down, and within minutes, it breached town limits.
So that's kind of what you're dealing is just a monster at that point. There is no tools we have in our toolbox to deal with that at that point. You get out of the way, you retreat, and you do what you can to protect communities and infrastructures.
That's what Tristan Strong was trying to do. He was transporting water to fight the fires when the flames moved in. He says he and others took refuge in a cinder block building, forced to watch Jasper burn.
Watching it all happen, listening to the explosions of propane tanks, and God knows what was happening behind the scenes, but all you could hear was kaboom, kaboom, kaboom.
He escaped and wants to return.
Just wanting to get back and go try and save what I can.
This is as close as we can get to Jasper. This is the entrance on the eastern side of the national park. Pretty busy, as you can see. You have people coming in and out. If you're not authorized, you're not getting in there. And even kilometers away from the town, you could still smell and taste the smoke from the fire. It's not clear exactly how many buildings burned, but Parks Canada says the damage is concentrated on the west side of town. The hospital, schools, and the wastewater treatment plant were protected. But into the night, crews from dozens of municipalities were still working to help put out fires. The scale of the loss shocking for the Premier.
And so although those of us who experienced Jasper as visitors can't imagine what it feels like to be a Jasperite right now, we share this sense of loss. Jasper, we will continue to stand by you.
Sam, it's cool, it's been raining, and no doubt that's helping firefighters.
Absolutely. Parks Canada is saying that, yes, this weather has subdued fire activity, but it's not enough to really put out the fires themselves on its own. So, of course, crews are still working on fires inside the town and that merged fire that's in the national park.
As you mentioned in your piece, critical infrastructure has been saved. What more do we know about what's been damaged, what hasn't been?
Well, when you think Jasper, you think tourism. And so we do know at least one family-owned hotel burned to the ground. The Fairmont-owned Jasper Park Lodge, it did suffer some fire damage, but they say their main structures are intact. We're also looking at bridges. If you've ever been on the Icefields Parkway, that main road that tourists go from Jasper to Banff, they're looking to see, Parks Canada that is, if any bridges along that highway have been affected. So not just structures we're looking at, but overall, what is the damage? That's the question.
All right, Sam, thank you.
Thank you.
It's now been 3 days since the exodus from Jasper, about 25,000 people having to pick up and leave on a moment's notice. And for those who call Jasper home, their futures have grown even more uncertain. Kyle backs now with how they're coping and how others are trying to help.
Still coming to grips with a wildfire tearing through their community, reality is starting to set in for evacuees.
I've been seeing a lot of pictures I didn't really want to see. Now everything is gone and I don't know what to do.
Take the time to decompress, think, and grieve.
Mourning what Jasper and the national park meant to them and how much is now reduced to rubble.
It's horrible. Like, it's just heartbreaking. We are such a strong community there, so it's like, it's really painful to see all of this happening.
About 25,000 fled in a late night evacuation on Monday. By Wednesday evening, the wildfire roared into the town site, wicked winds and scorching temperatures creating towering flames.
We're playing it moment to moment. Our children have a million questions.
So sad to know that so many families and people have not just lost their belongings, but their livelihood and their beautiful park.
Exhausted and in a state of shock, many have turned to evacuation centers. The city of Calgary briefly closed its building on Wednesday as numbers dwindled. As more evacuees arrived, there was no help available.
I apologize sincerely. I can only imagine what it must have been like to have to rapidly evacuate and then drive 12 to 15 hours to show up here and be met with closed doors.
The center reopened overnight and will remain for the next 2 days.
We're seeing in the evacuees that are arriving now are typically a younger population that's working in Jasper that drove themselves here, and they need some accommodation.
Alice Varshowske left her Jasper home in a hurry, not realizing she may never return. She just learned her home was burned.
If I break down now, what will I do? I will just sit and cry and nothing's going to change, right?
Kyle, the Premier says that the rebuild's going to take a long time, keeping people out of their homes for a significant amount of time.
Well, several years of effort is how long it took to rebuild other communities devastated by wildfires in the past, like Fort McMurray here in Alberta and Lytton in British Columbia. For now, at evacuation centers like this one here in Calgary, the focus is on providing the basics: food, water, clothing, baby formula, pet food, items to help in the short term. Ian, trying to provide some comfort to evacuees during this incredibly difficult time.
All right, Kyle Bax in Calgary tonight. As you saw in Sam's story, Alberta's Premier is one of many across the province grieving the devastation in Jasper. During an emotional news conference, Danielle Smith described the scope of what's been lost.
For many generations, the town of Jasper and the park surrounding it have been a source of pride. With some of the most beautiful scenery in the entire, in the world. Our grandparents visited to experience the majesty of this place with its mountains and lakes and meadows. They took our parents, who then took us to this special spot that they'd spent time in as children. And now we take our own kids and our own loved ones and visitors from around the world to feel that same feeling that you get with your first glimpse of the mountains on the horizon. A feeling that even though you've just left home, you're coming home.
As the Premier described it so well, there is something special about Jasper for millions of visitors who go to experience its natural beauty. Among those visitors, movie stars and royalty. But as Lindsay Duncombe tells us, there is a lot of worry that some of that rich history might be lost.
This place is unbelievable.
Every year, more than 2 million tourists visit Jasper. There's something about the place that is so essentially Canadian. Just ask forest ecologist Phil Burton. That's a 1970s-era selfie at the park. This last year with his grandson.
Interesting that places like that can feel both like home and like a special event.
Jasper is named for a voyageur who ran the trading post. The fur trade brought settlers. The railway brought tourists.
This mirror of the gods is a highlight of Jasper National Park.
The iconic views magical even in old-school black and white. In the Second World War, Jasper was home to a secret project, a failed attempt to make an aircraft carrier from ice. Hollywood came for the scenery. Marilyn Monroe stayed at the Jasper Park Lodge, the same fancy hotel that more recently hosted Queen Elizabeth, and
it's literally like the clearest water ever.
You really can't be sad here, honestly.
Joey, we're in Jasper!
the reality TV dating competition, The Bachelor. The hotel says its structures appear to be okay, but history buff Craig Baird is worried iconic buildings may be gone.
when something like this happens, if something burns down, the history remains, like the stories of those places remain, but the ability to touch that history, to be within the walls of a church or a building or a hotel that has existed for decades, that's gone forever.
There are worries about the land, too. Indigenous people were kicked out of their traditional territory to make way for the park. Alberta Métis leader Kayla Mitchell took this photo visiting Jasper last year.
You know, that's where our ancestors were, and a lot of there's grave sites there, there's homesteads there, you know, that's where our people come from.
Land will rejuvenate, buildings rebuilt. But what happened in Jasper is a loss shared by so many. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Joining us again tonight is the Mayor of Jasper, Richard Ireland. I can't imagine, Mayor, how difficult a 24 hours this has been for you. How are you doing this evening?
Well, not as well as I had hoped. Just listening to your story and your other guests and the Premier describe their reaction, and it is unfathomable. It is so appreciated by myself and by our community members that others are able to express that love for Jasper and that shared loss. But as the Premier, I think, said and said so correctly, it is just a different level for those of us who have and who do call Jasper home. It is just such a tremendous loss. I'm sorry, I'll collect myself, but it's so difficult to hear others speak of our town in that sense, and it's not at all that we're disrespectful. We appreciate the sentiment that's expressed, but I have to say that as a third generation Jasperite, it's unbearable.
Yeah, well, you have no apologies that you need to make to anybody. It's, I think people across the country, but particularly people in Lytton and Slave Lake and Fort McMurray and West Kelowna, at least in those communities, really have an understanding of what you and other people are going through. Have you had a chance to speak to others from Jasper who have also, evacuated? What are they saying to you?
Unfortunately, I'm away from the community as well. I've landed at my son's farm. You can see my office now is my granddaughter's bedroom with little twinkly lights behind me. And I haven't been able to get away from here to go and meet people. I'm not too far from Calgary, and I hope to make a trip in there to meet evacuees at the center there. Our residents have dispersed across a broad swath of Western Canada, throughout Alberta and into BC. So it's difficult. So I use opportunities like this, for which I am so thankful you offer, as a method of reaching out to our residents who are displaced, as I say, in places I perhaps am not even aware of.
In Jasper, maybe you have a better sense, but let me ask you this. I talked about those other towns in Western Canada that have been devastated by wildfires. They've gone through the shock and the grief, but also the resilience and, in many cases, the rebuilding. What do you think the next few months are going to be like for Jasper?
Well, I find reason and cause to be somewhat buoyed and optimistic, and I'm doing my best to express that to the community. I am so relieved to know that there are structures remaining, including homes and businesses, which means that over time, as we assess the situation and ensure that we have the critical infrastructure in place, people will be able to re-enter, get back into their homes, start their businesses again, resume their livelihoods, although in certainly a limited fashion. But my thought is that if there are homes for some, there is community for all. we will find opportunities to come together physically and, of course, emotionally and spiritually, and we will demonstrate the inherent strength of our community, and we will rebuild that town.
I've always been impressed by the way so many mayors rise to the occasion and speak on behalf of their community, and you certainly have been doing that. Mayor Ireland, thank you very much for speaking with us again this evening.
Well, I appreciate those kind words, Ian. I, again, appreciate the opportunity, and I do regret that I'm a bit of a blubbering mess. It's just, as you appreciate, such a tremendously difficult time.
Well, you're
profound sadness for our entire community, and I have the honor of trying to express that and keep us together, and I'm so happy that you've provided an opportunity to do that.
We appreciate your eloquence, Mayor. Thank you.